Thank you so much for being with us today. This is the Preschool for All measure on the November ballot, and members of the campaign are meeting with the Oregonian Editorial Board. I'd like to turn it over to the campaign to just kind of tell us a little bit about what this measure is about and why voters should vote for it.
Hi, Helen. I'm Jessica Vega Peterson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a Multnomah County Commissioner, and I've been championing the Preschool for All work for the last 2+ years. It's really wonderful to be here today, and I just want to say thanks for taking the time to really focus on such an important issue. We're really glad to have this opportunity to talk to you and to talk to all the viewers about what this measure is about and what it can do for our community. So I can introduce, and talk about why I'm so excited that we have this really game-changing opportunity to invest in our children and our families and our workers and our entire economy with Preschool for All. But I wanted to, share the reason that this work is so important to me really has to do with a story that my mom told me about when she was a student. So when she was in 4th grade, she took this district-wide standardized test, and she ended up scoring the highest out of every single 4th grader in the school district. And I was so proud of her. I was so proud that this Mexican-American girl was the best. And it was just, and I was so proud of her, but she didn't seem as excited about that. And then she told me that she actually didn't even learn that that had happened until she was in 11th grade when a counselor told her about it. And she never knew about the potential she had. And her school, the school district, never invested in her as a student. And it really broke my heart all those years that she didn't know what she was capable of. And, and it made me realize that our systems aren't set up so that kids like my mom, girls, brown and Black students, have the tools that they need to succeed, have the supports that they need to succeed. And it's really, driven the work that I've done to make sure that all people, all kids have the opportunities to do that. And it's really motivates the work that I put behind Preschool for All. And that's why I'm so proud that we're so close to getting this a reality and having voters have the opportunity to vote on it this fall. And I have to say, the opportunities that we're presenting are not just, the fact that it is, but I'm really proud of the way that we've done this and the way that we've really had this community-centered process and bringing it together. So, when I was putting the Preschool for All task force together, it wasn't just, we had the usual suspects. We had business, we had elected leaders, we had school districts there, but we also had brown and Black parents who have laid a foundation for what they think the vision of preschool should be for years that they've been working on this. We had culturally specific organizations, partners like Kairos and Latino Network who are here today, who were at the table from the inception. We had providers, we had workers. We really wanted to make an inclusive process so that we were saying, what does Multnomah County need? What do our brown and Black and all children of color need to set up the system? And that was part of the work that we did. And that's why, what we're putting forward now really is a universal preschool system that's going to be the best in the country. And and I'm happy, if Rico, if you want to share, as part of Latino Network, you have been here from the beginning. So if you want to share some of your perspective on it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. Ricardo Lujan Valerio, I'm the Director of Advocacy with Latino Network. One of the things that really excites us about Preschool for All is that we're finally coming into the fruition of such a long process that was really thoughtful. And as the Commissioner stated, included a multitude of community leaders and organizations to really build something that was strong, but most importantly, centered in communities. Oftentimes when we talk about policy build, when we talk about developing a new program of this kind, we don't often see ourselves in the policy itself, let alone being centered on it. So starting off in a place where it was led by those that are directly affected, it was led by experts that work with those communities, and with a mission of always making sure that we end with a goal that serves those communities that have been historically and currently underserved in our county, and really just in statewide and nationwide in a multitude of services. I think we finally came with a good product that everybody can get around. And quite honestly, will become a blueprint, not just here in the state of Oregon, but nationally. So having that come to fruition and see that really be available for the community, hopefully in the future, is something that I'm really excited about.
Great. I'm wondering if if someone can lay out exactly how this will work.
Yeah, so I can do that. So what we've done is put together a Preschool for All plan that provides universal preschool access for all 3 and 4-year-olds in Multnomah County. It will be administered by the Multnomah County government. It'll be a division under our Department of County Human Services. And it is going to be a program that we want all providers to be able to take part in. So it's not just something that's like an extension of the public school system, for instance, but it's going to be inclusive of, schools, of course, but also, large preschool providers, smaller providers, even licensed home-based care, right? All of we want to make it inclusive because we know that first of all, there's a huge need to grow the system. Right now, we are only publicly funding about 15% of all kids, 3 and 4-year-olds in Multnomah County with access to preschool. So we need to grow the system that we have. So we want to be inclusive as possible. We also know that for families, they want to have access to the full range of how they're going to be able to access preschool and what's right for them. So whether it's school year or year round, whether it's full day or part day, whether it's a multi-generational approach, right? We want to grow that system and provide supports to the existing providers as we're growing the system. The mechanism that's paid for is going to be a tiered marginal higher income tax. So it's going to be a tax at a certain level. It's 1.5%. Of marginal tax rate for income, household income over 200,000, and then an additional 1.5% income tax rate for those households above 400,000. And there's also a piece in there to get to full universal in 2026. There will be an increase. It's written as 0.8% to get to full universal, but that will actually be informed by a team that will research what exactly is needed. We put the 0.8% in. Really conservatively, we assumed that there were going to be no additional state expanded slots for preschool, as well as no additional federal slots. But we wanted to make sure that we were going to have something in there that would make sure that we could provide it for all 3 and 4-year-olds as we build the program. If anybody else wants to add more about the program that I forgot, please do.
I think Ricardo, again, one of the things that I would just want to add on is really, again, the focus on culturally specific providers also be available. What we know is that about 65% of the youth that would be serving under this program would be people of color. And oftentimes as similar as you see in the K-12 system and higher ed system, having someone that's providing for you that as part of your community that understands your cultures, that's very hard to come around. And so really focusing on the build-up infrastructure systems for people of color and providers of color is going to be essential in making sure that it's not just slots available, but really quality slots for those communities that, again, have been underserved for a long time.
I would just add a couple of things real quick. This is Mark Holloway. I've been a co-chair of this effort for the formal effort with the county and current finance chair of the campaign, but I was also one of the facilitators in a role at Social Venture Partners, facilitators of getting this over the past 8 years. And one of the important pieces we recognized from the beginning of creating Preschool for All, there's lots of needs of kids and families, but in order to actually build the capacity of our system to go to full universal, it's not just about money. It's about teachers. It's about making sure that we keep teachers in a profession that they love, that we give them a living wage, that we support them professionally with coaching and professional development, and also that we have programs in our community college system, in our higher ed, and in our community-based organizations that will help to develop the teacher workforce that we need, both those that are there now, those that may have been there and left, but also the new ones that are coming up. We need to more than double our teaching workforce. We also have to double the amount of physical spaces, places and spaces in the community. So this program puts money into some of that teacher development. It puts money into incentivizing and growing our physical infrastructure as well, so that we're building the capacity to put kids on carpets, as we like to call it, not kids in seats, to put kids on carpets as early as we can and as fast as we can with high quality to get to universal.
Thank you. I'm wondering if someone can address why the county is best equipped to do this. What is its expertise in overseeing preschool education for kids?
Yeah, I I can start off with that one. So, when the Preschool for All report came out, we had like a task force that was really looking at the finance and administration questions of it. And so that report really had some criteria that we had in there of what an administration of this kind of program should look like. And it was really, we wanted to make sure it was countywide. We wanted to make sure it was somebody who had, experience with these kinds of programs, who are capable of managing the program. And so that was released in July of 2019. And from that point, there was an internal conversation that happened at Multnomah County as, in terms of like, is Multnomah County the right entity to do this and can we do this? And one of the reasons we looked at the county is that we've seen a lot of the programs that are, city specific, like I'm on the Portland Children's Levy allocation committee, and a lot of the programs that we find are stopped at the city limits, right? Well, we know that because of the cost of living here in Portland, a lot of the families that we most need to serve are pushed outside of the city limits, right? So we wanted something that had a region that was going to reach as many of the families as we could. And so as Multnomah County was having that conversation, looking at the history that the county has of really supporting and investing in programs that serve these kids in the community, like the SUN program, the Schools Uniting Neighborhoods program that the county does a huge job of funding, as well as the relationships and the programs that we support in community-based organizations like SEI, like Latino Network, and the community connections we have with that. And then so those were like really clear, positives and pluses in terms of the county's role in this. And then we looked at how we could set up, this up internally, like what would be needed from an administration and headcount way. And, it was decided like the Department of County Human Services is a great home for this and would be a great fit to do this program.
I want to add in a couple points here too, if I can. I got the internet is unstable, so I'm keeping my video off so I don't lose you guys. But two things. One, I think from my vantage point, I sit on the Early Learning Council for Oregon, and I would say that throughout the state, counties are very much involved in early childhood because they deal with health and human services, and more than any other probably part of the educational continuum, it's very much a mix of health and human services as well as education. And so the county makes sense, I think, from my vantage point when I look at what's happening throughout the state and the involvement of counties in early learning. And then as Jessica articulated, the county has been unique and really a standout, I would say, in the state for how it prioritizes children and communities of color. The way that they have funded and supported children of color, I think is actually a baseline that we're talking about at the statewide Racial Justice Council level around how do you target investments in a very strategic way to improve outcomes for those who are most underserved. And the SUN system has been a template that we have looked at on how to do that well. So I think when it comes to priority populations and populations that have been most impacted, the county does have a track record of supporting and investing in them in ways that other government entities and entities in general don't. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for those two reasons as well.
But does the county have the educational expertise to say this is a quality preschool program? I mean, are they going to be able to monitor that and have the knowledge about whether something is meeting the goals that you hope to meet?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the other things to build on what Kali said, there's, when you look at the entities that are actually serving as early learning hubs across the state, right? Those are county based. So Multnomah County has been a partner with Early Learning Multnomah in setting up and working with the Early Learning Multnomah along with, United Way as a partner. So we have experience with working with this Early Learning Multnomah Preschool program for the last several years. As well as we have a lot of really great partnerships with organizations that are going to be, providing the program, and good connections with groups like the Resource and Referral, network that would be working directly with providers to provide the professional development and things like that. And I think one of the things that's really important is that, making sure that the program that we're developing is really meeting those quality standards, which we use basically like we're aligned with the state standards. We looked at NACE, which is a national association, for early learning and early childhood. And so we've adopted, the standards from there. We really made sure that that we're aligning with the quality that's being done, and that there will be a third-party evaluation to make sure that we're reaching those goals.
Yeah, I was going to say the early learning division was involved in the quality, like in sort of creating this so that there are quality standards that align with what the early learning division has outlined.
And that's kind of my question right there, is how throughout the process are we going to make sure that these goals are being met? How are we going to evaluate the different teaching that is happening across all these various facilities? Who would be doing that, and how would that be tracked?
There is well, I don't want to speak for you, Jessica, in terms of what the county is planning on doing. I would just say that the state is responsible for tracking quality early learning throughout the state, all providers, regardless of sort of where the funding is. And Megan knows this as former early learning director. So I'll hand it over to you, Megan. But yeah.
Sure, I'm happy to take that one. My name is Megan Irwin, and I'm serving as the policy advisor for the campaign, and served as the policy advisor and facilitator through the task force process and the pre-referral process. So the program has a set of quality standards, as the commissioner and Cully were both saying, and there are a couple of nationally normed tools that will be used to determine which programs are ready from day one to come in from a quality perspective, and then who is ready to come in with some coaching and some support to get up to the level of quality that the program expects. In terms of accountability, there are a set of outcomes that the task force put forward around outcomes for children and outcomes related to workforce retention. So in the early years of the program, there'll be a process evaluation looking all along the way to make sure that it's being implemented well, leading up to an outcomes evaluation once we get the first cohort of kids actually into elementary school, along with ongoing formative assessment of educator quality and formative assessment of what's happening in the classroom. So there are quite a few quality controls built in to the program to make sure that what's being offered really is quality preschool. And when we say quality, what we're really talking about is a joyful, developmentally appropriate, culturally affirming, and inclusive environment. And the quality standards are in the Preschool for All framework, which I'm sure Alicia has as a leave behind for you, but they are adapted from the National Association for the Education of Young Children's program quality standards, which are just kind of nationally recognized as best in class. And then we layered in quality standards related to affirming culture, creating inclusive environments, and culturally responsive anti-biased teaching.
So let me ask, how many kids will this serve, in the beginning, and what is it looking at scaling up to?
The actual timeline is in that the framework document that was referenced, but so this should this pass, this is going to go into effect on January 1st, and then the first children will be in the classrooms in fall of 2022, and then and it grows between 2022 to 2026 to really serve the priority populations, to make sure that we're inclusive of those, which is going to be about, I think, 7,000 to 8,000 students, depending on the uptick rate of the program. So 7,000 to 8,000 in the first few years, and then to get to full universal, which is about 15,000, would be by 2030.
So roughly 7,500 by 2026.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're expecting, sorry. Can't do two things at the same time, apparently. So you're expecting about 202 million in revenue in 2026?
Yes, I think so. I know it's 133 million the first year, and it probably goes up to that by the 2026.
So then that would be about $27,000 per student. By 2026, you would expect to be spending $27,000 per student in this preschool program. Is that right? I mean, I basically took 202 million divided by 7,500. Does that seem like an effective or efficient spend?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to think about it in the way of like, this is the money we're investing in a system to really change, to set up an entire system to provide universal access to all students, all 3 and 4-year-old children in Multnomah County. And so it's, you know, you can look at it per student, but really this is about creating the system. So in addition to just what the cost is, you know, per slot or per, you know, per child per slot, we were also, you know, that is also taking into account the living wage for teachers, the professional development, the investment in infrastructure. It's putting into, you know, one of the things that we've seen in other jurisdictions as they've rolled this out is looking at the impact that it's had on the 0 to 3 childcare system, and actually the negative impacts that it has had on the 0 to 3 childcare system. So, you know, we wanted to make sure that we had dollars available to help stabilize that system, because the effects of COVID honestly have been just devastating to childcare across the board in the country. Like, we're looking at 50% of surveyed Oregon providers are saying they're not sure they're going to be able to stay open unless they have public investment in the system, right? So that was something that we had built into the program, and it's more timely than ever. You know, and so it's really about making sure that we are creating the entire system, including, you know, supports for before and after care, so families can actually use the system, to make sure that it's a system that's going to work and that people can use it.
But I guess that goes to another question that I have, because you've got the Preschool Promise program that the state offers, and they, you know, they're receiving new Student Success Act money. They received about $30.8 million for this coming year, and with that they've added, I think, 2,300 new slots. So that works out to about $12,000 per slot. So that's half the cost of, actually less than half the cost of what Multnomah County is looking to do, but that's also focused on public funding of quality preschool programs. And so it's sort of like, why does it make sense to build this new framework as opposed to kind of people looking to the state to increase its capacity and do it at less than half the cost?
A couple things, Helen. Oh, okay.
Go ahead. Nope, Kali, did you want to jump on that?
Well, yeah, because I was involved in like the Preschool Promise. They're not the same thing. First, I think the math is not as simple as what you laid out, Helen. There's a lot of infrastructure being built that this has to include. Preschool Promise is really about adding, for the most part, extra classrooms to existing preschools. That's not the same thing. And in fact, some of the Preschool Promise dollars are paying for existing teachers. So it's not an infrastructure building element in the same way. It was trying to allow for innovation, but when we first approved Preschool Promise, it was only for 1 year. So you really didn't have people applying to get Preschool Promise dollars because there wasn't a guarantee that the dollars were going to continue. So I don't know that it's an apples to apples comparison. And I don't think it's a $27,000 per pupil allocation in the way that the math was done. I think that there are a lot of upfront costs, infrastructure building costs that account for this. Both Preschool Promise and this are looking at wage, you know, they're both drivers to increase wages. So that's a standout to the overall system where you're paying teachers more, because right now childcare workers get less than living wage, and they're mostly women and women of color. And so there's a big issue there. And I know that we're looking at how do we drive the workforce development side to start paying childcare workers what they deserve. Those were my thoughts, Mark. I welcome you to add.
No, I don't have much more to say. I would reiterate that the math is not quite that simple, although I think it's tempting to take a number and divide it. There are 19,000 3 and 4-year-olds in Multnomah County. So some of those are currently subsidized at 15% that the state is paying for. You know, they'll be in schools, in preschools locally that are part of this system as well. So it really is intending, if you want to add another 4,000 there, I think that's relevant, because we're building infrastructure, the teaching and the physical infrastructure in particular, as well as the professional development, that is going to benefit all 3 and 4-year-olds. And that's just the base number now, much less how it grows by 2026 and how it grows by 2032, as we see the population increase, in particular the child population in Multnomah County.
And if I may, I do think this is an investment worth really getting into for a few reasons. One, I do think that since similar to the work that brought this work forward in the first place, the county's not going to do it alone. And we're always going to be in partnership to making sure that, you know, when we're talking about the implementation, the infrastructure, the build out, the communication and connection with providers of color and such, it's all going to be brought up as a team, as a cohort, as the plan was built. So I do think that Multnomah County wouldn't be alone in making sure that this comes into implementation. The second thing as well is that if anything COVID has taught us is that it's exacerbated some of the biggest disparities that we've seen, right? And one other thing that really stood out for me for the May revenue forecast in the state level as well was one of the recommendations of building up early learning infrastructure and systems. And I think that was a call to make sure that we as leaders within our communities step up to the moment and provide the systems that essential workers were relying upon and were just not built, right? And so now you have parents of that are essential workers, and specifically, again, people of color that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 consequences and now have to be both the caregiver of their children while they have to also perform their duty. So I do think there's a significant return of investment when it comes to this measure, but also a drastic need for the moment that we're living in today.
And I love,
Can I just say
Rika,
one
that
more
you brought
thing
up.
too?
Sorry, Kelly.
Sorry. On the ROI, and Helen, you've heard me speak about this before, the investment in early childhood is, I think, incalculable when you look at achievement gaps, opportunity gaps, and where they start. So there have been economists that have looked at the economic impact for investing in early childhood, but when we're seriously talking about equity and the disparities that we see play out throughout the system in multiple ways, it starts early. The neural connections being made are rapid in the first 6 years of a child's life. So the ability to get children off in the right place really is predicated upon giving them that foundation. So it's hard, for me, it's hard to talk about value because it is so, like, all the neuroscience, all the research talks about how important it is that children have a firm foundation of quality early childhood access. And we see huge disparities here when it comes to low income kids and kids of color. So I just wanted to say that the investment is far beyond worth it.
And I appreciate everything you're saying. I guess sort of the point and kind of what, you know, we're looking to get answered is if we're looking at taking, you know, $202 million and how best to invest that in creating quality preschool programs, is this the right approach? And again, you know, 202 million, kind of what you envision at the end of that, you know, by the time we get to 2026, is it would be serving roughly 7,000 to 8,000 kids in Multnomah County. Looking at the state, which already has an existing program and has been expanding it, you know, looking at their per student cost, it would serve more than twice as many students. So again, it's you know, I understand what you're saying regarding needing to build up the infrastructure and that there's a lot of aspects to that. But I mean, do you feel that preschool program is not of that quality?
Helen, I want to speak to this for a second. Just, I think you're bringing up very good points. I think we're at a deficit a little bit because we're not actually able to see your math.
Sure. It's just 202 million is the number from the Preschool for All estimate of how much will be raised in 2026.
Okay.
I might be able to help.
So that's the beginning. That's the beginning of a ramp up to serving all of the kids. So part of our model is to make sure that we don't go into deficit over the years. So one of the things that we need to do in the earliest years, as you'll see in the plan, you'll see the ramp kind of grow. So in the earliest years, even next year, we'll be collecting about $133 million, but a lot of that needs to go in reserve and infrastructure building. When you get to 2026, and we're beginning to say we have to serve another, I think it's 5,000 kids in order to get to full universal, we need to start a bit in reserve, and we need to grow additional capacity there. But that earliest year, to judge and say that the entire program is raising $200 million a year every year after that, if you're taking one snapshot of 1 year, I think it distorts the actual per child cost.
That's why I looked at 2026.
So look at 2032 for me, raising that same amount of money. And that's when we're talking about full universal. So divide 2032 at full universal with the same rate that we're getting in 2026. So when the rate goes up in 2026, it's not increasing every year after that. I think you need to look at what it's going to cost full universal, because all of that along the way includes capacity building. So you can't take 8,000 kids in 2026 and divide it, divide 200 million by 8,000 kids. It doesn't I don't
Helen,
think
I
it
might be
captures
able
the full
to
nuance.
help with just thinking through the comparison to Preschool Promise. I was the state's early learning system director at the time that we created Preschool Promise. And so the slot cost that you're looking at, the $12,000 per year per child, is only the classroom cost. So what you don't see in that formula are the early learning division's cost for capacity building, quality improvement, and coaching. That's in a different fund that still comes out of the Preschool Promise budget that's not reflected in that 12,000. So with Preschool for All, if you look at the full scope of the budget, it includes costs for coaching and professional development and workforce development, as well as costs for expanding our preschool infrastructure in the county. We have a major teacher shortage and a major facilities shortage in this community. So we won't be able to reach universal without investments in our workforce and investments in being able to help programs expand. And so when you're looking at the math and doing that simple division, you're kind of it's inclusive of all of those costs. The state's cost, if you were to wrap in their staff that work on quality improvement and coaching, if you were to wrap in the funds that go out to like childcare resource and referral for quality improvement, that slot cost gets higher. So the $12,000 that you're looking at is the like in classroom cost with, you know, actually some infrastructure stuff that you could wrap into that if you were to look at the full state's budget, if that makes sense. And so that's why it kind of looks higher on our end. I will say our per slot cost per classroom is in the $12,000 to $20,000 per year per kid range, depending on program type. And that's because the cost of quality costs a little bit different depending on what type of program you're operating. And so it needs to be funded at a level where folks can actually provide quality care and education. And then we have to include in this investment, especially in the early years, what it costs to actually build a supply, because we just don't have it right now. There's no way to have a universal preschool program in this community until we develop the workforce and the spaces for kids to be, which is a big part of the Preschool for All plan. And there's a ton more detail that Alicia can send you in our framework. And if you go to Appendix E in the framework after this interview, you'll see the 5-year projected budget and how those different kinds of costs kind of stack on top of each other to build a comprehensive program.
Helen, my name is Lydia Gray-Holyfield, and I'm a parent that's on, that has been on the task force, that has had the voice, and I apologize. I don't feel well today, but I did not want to miss this opportunity. I hear what you're saying, but do we really put a price tag on making sure that every brown and black child in this community has free access to preschool? Is there a price tag that we can put on that? I don't think so. As a mom of a brown and black child, I don't want to have to worry about if my child is going to receive what they need. And it's because of a price tag. You're comparing apples to oranges, and that's not the same. And at the end of the day, there is no amount of money that I feel like is going to average up or meet what we need. We want to make sure that the teachers are being paid to teach our children. We want to make sure that the classrooms have everything they need in the classrooms. And so right now, it is going to take a little bit more money to get that started. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited because I don't look at it and say, oh my goodness, we're choosing Preschool for All over P3. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is we're trying to make sure that we're building a firm foundation for brown and black children in this community that has never been built before. We're making sure that the children in this community have an opportunity to go to school for free and not have to worry about it. We're making sure that when parents drop off their kids to classrooms and the kids that are being dropped off, and they look like the children that we're serving. The teachers look like the children, because we're also providing job opportunities for that same parent. So the languages that are being spoken in the classroom are also being spoken at home. And so we're providing that. And so when you say this amount of money is going to change, or why is it cheaper to do this? We have to take an accountability that this hasn't been done so far. And if it had, then we wouldn't be pushing this preschool for all. It would already have been done. And right now, what we're wanting for is for people to vote yes for preschool for all, because we want to make sure that every brown and black child in 2026 has an opportunity to be in somebody's classroom and being served by the people that look like them, being served by the teachers that greet them in the mornings, and that they're being treated as fair and equal and given a foundation to be successful in school. That's what we're asking for.
We don't have any issues with the goals. We share those goals. And it's one reason why we were very supportive of the Student Success Act. We were very supportive of the equity dollars that were being focused on Black and brown children, on ensuring that that student outcomes improve. We were very supportive of saying that even in this pandemic, you cannot use those equity dollars to go to backfill other general student needs. We absolutely share that. Our concern is, should Multnomah County, which has no background in handling preschool education, all of a sudden be authorized to do so? Is that the best way to meet these objectives and meet these goals? One question we've asked about, the expertise aspect with Multnomah County. I mean, one other question is, how will this be collected? How will this tax be collected? I mean, it's just logistical stuff.
Oh yeah, that's one of the things that the county has been working on over the last the year plus. Is what would this look like? How would it be administrated? How would we do the tax collection? So the Multnomah County Finance has been in discussions with the City of Portland, so that the City of Portland would be the entity that does the revenue collection, just as they're being the entity that's doing the revenue collection with the Here Together measure that was passed.
And so that is in the works. You don't have an intergovernmental agreement at this point right now.
Right. I mean, those conversations aren't happening. It's in the works. I think, and so there have been discussions about what would that look like, what would they need, but and I think the IGA really isn't able to happen until after the November election.
And so this is also just another question about efficiency. I mean, the state has an existing mechanism. Student Success Act funds are going to early learning, specifically to preschool promise, et cetera. You have the Department of Revenue that has that, already collects business taxes. And so, I guess, again, the question is about the efficiency of this. Is this an efficient way to provide preschool?
I think a couple things. I think that, I know that there are not enough slots. I think there's 400 slots being allocated to Multnomah County through the state fund. So that is nowhere meets the need, and it nowhere meted the need prior to the pandemic. Post-pandemic, during pandemic, we've seen so much childcare shut down that the need is actually even greater than it was before. I'm struck by the efficiency piece. I don't fully understand, because the overseeing quality is still done by the state. The council and the early learning division are responsible for ensuring that all childcare throughout the state is meeting the standards, and that the people are registered. And so that doesn't change by the county funding it. Like the same accountability holds, just like the K-12 system. There are certain things that districts do, but the state still sort of oversees the K-12 system. And I think that doesn't change in this scenario, particularly because we're talking about a system in the past that has been made up of private entities. What the state is subsidizing private entities. This is creating a public system. They are different things, and the state does not have the capacity right now, and I can say that as a council member, to create a public system, but the state does see the need for more preschool slots and is supportive because they know how important early learning is. I think Multnomah County has an ability to create and lay a groundwork for what does a public early childhood system look like, where all children, particularly children that are most impacted, are served, and that you prioritize not just center-based care, because that's another thing that you see with some of the state dollars, the people that actually apply tend to be the center-based childcare systems, and those are serving a much larger white population. And the data bears this out. And we heard from many family care providers and family friends and neighbor providers that the process of applying to the state funds was too arduous for them to actually receive the dollars. Now, the Early Learning Equity Fund is a little different, but in terms of the dollars earmarked for sort of preschool, with the exception of Head Start, it is very difficult for the multitude of childcare providers to access those funds. And we know that children of color are disproportionately in family-based care, family, friends, and neighbor care. You know, they're hybrids where, like programs like Latino Networks program, where it's focusing on helping families support their children, culturally specific programs. None of those are really receiving the resources that the state has. I obviously wear two hats as someone who serves on the state board. So I think that the state is trying very hard. They have not been funded adequately. There's very little capacity within the early learning division to do what they need to do. So I am in no way trying to place any blame on the early learning division, but I do think they are very different things. And I think that this is the opportunity. What excites me about this is knowing how important early childhood is, knowing that there might be that we have figured out a way to fund a publicly funded system for early learning that is accessible to the children most in need. That is a pretty amazing thing, and we've seen other cities do it, and I think we have a real opportunity to shine here as a region and as a state if we get this right.
Yeah, and you know, I think when we're talking about efficiency, this is probably one of the most efficient processes that I've been a part of, and I think that a lot of the community organizations that are part of it have been a part of. We're talking about a 2-year plus process that have been really thinking about every single step of the way, both in you know, the execution of getting this up at the table and then the implementation at the end of the day. So in efficiency, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's also important to recognize that for this kind of initiative of early learning and serving our kiddos in the best quality possible, it's going to take everybody to really be part of this, right? It's not just the county, it's the city, it's the state. It's a multi-jurisdictional responsibility. And I think what we hope here with Preschool for All to do is that we actually build a good blueprint that can then be implemented statewide in a multitude of ways. But the conversation has to start somewhere. And I think that some of the programming, as Kali has stated, in the state level has been beneficial in many ways. It really differs from what we're trying to do here. And to Ms. Lydia's points, it's building a new system that hasn't been built before. It's building new mechanisms that haven't been built before. You know, we're fortunate with Multnomah County that has experience in administering similar programs like the SUN program. Latino Network is one of those recipients where we give wraparound services to kiddos in the K through 12 system. We're fortunate that we have some of these systems, some of these blueprints that we can use as reference to building something out for Preschool for All. And again, because of that, I think we're pretty, it's promising, and it's really, really exciting to make sure that we build our own framework and our own blueprint that ultimately the goal would be to make it statewide. But in terms of efficiency and process, this is probably one of the most efficient and involved processes that I've been a part of in both local initiatives and statewide initiatives.
So I have a question about what happens if a program isn't meeting the standards, especially when we talk about some of these smaller family and friend providers. You know, what kind of services will be offered to bring those programs up to par? And then if they don't get there, what happens to those families who've been relying upon a family or a friend? Then how do they get the preschool? How would they get the preschool after that?
So I think that for that, I mean, that's why so much of what we're doing is investing in professional development and career development and working with providers and working with small licensed, you know, home-based care to make sure that they have the support they need to be able to do that. You know, we want to make sure, and we want to set everyone up for success. So that's why we have the 18-month ramp up before we have kids on carpets in fall of 2022 to make sure we're doing that outreach to providers. You know, as was mentioned earlier, you know, we know there's going to be some who are going to be able to come into the program earlier because because they're just already going to be very close or at the goals that we have. But we do need to, and this was very intentional from the very beginning of the Preschool for All Task Force. We want it to be inclusive of all the ways we're delivering care, so that we can bring those people along, bring those providers along, because what we've seen in too many other jurisdictions is that they've been left they've been left behind, and it's had negative impacts over the entire childcare ecosystem. So I think, it's not a punitive. This is really where we want to provide the support so that they can flourish, so that their children can flourish, and that we can grow the system to give access to universally to all 3- and 4-year-old students. And I would have to mention, just to go back to the question about comparing what the state's doing and what we're doing, the state is not a program that's set up for universal access to provide preschool for every single 3- and 4-year-old in the state at all. It is a very limited amount with 100% or 200% of the federal poverty level. So I think that, fact of what we're talking about in like helping to subsidize care for a very small part of this population, to providing universal quality preschool access to every 3- and 4-year-old in Multnomah County is a completely different thing. And we're doing that, we're making that investment because, you have to talk about the benefits as much as you talk about the costs, right? And we have years of research that has proven that the benefits of preschool far outweigh the costs, right? Like the most recent number I've seen was by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation that says, for every dollar you invest in early education, you get a $16 return to the community because of the long-term positive impacts that it has. And that's phenomenal. So I think that when we grow a true system where we're inclusive of all the providers, we do need to bring them along and support them and work with them if they're not reaching the goals that they are, to make sure that they can and find out what support that they need. So that's it. Megan, if you wanted to jump in to give a little more specifics.
Yeah, I just want to, go ahead, Lydia, and then I'll just build on that.
The other part of it is we're going to be coaching, and that's the most important part. We're providing coaching to each and every child care. So every 6 months, they will get a new, we'll go in and we'll check and we'll make sure they're meeting the standards that they need to meet. And if not, then we're going to provide that coaching and the tools that they're going to need to be successful. That is one of the most important parts of it, is we just want to make sure that they're getting the tools that they need to be successful. So we're going to provide them with coaching. We're going to provide them with training, ongoing training. So they'll get ongoing and consistent training all the time. They'll get coaching around what areas that they need to maybe improve or to change or whatever. So we're not just going to open up or partner with these different preschools and then just leave them alone. We're going to continue to provide them with tools, coaching, professional development. We're going to be able to have conversations. We're going to be able to partner with them with other preschools that are meeting the standards so that they can know what it looks like and what they need to do. So we'll provide them with tools, again, coaching, partnership with other preschools that are meeting what they need to have met. And then that way they'll know. And so we just won't set them up. And if they aren't meeting it, then we'll give them the opportunity and find out what we can do different to help them meet it. We want to make sure that we're partnering with them because we don't want anyone to close or feel like that they can't meet what they need to meet. We're going to give them every tool and every opportunity to make that happen.
Lydia's got it exactly right. And Laura, I love that question. And I do want to say, as some of the best preschool that I've seen in this state are home-based programs. When I was the early learning director, I toured the state, spent a lot of time in programs, and there's some excellent intentional instruction happening in home-based programs. And so we're glad that we're going to be able to include them. And Lydia's got it exactly right. As soon as the measure passes, the program will start to build its provider pipeline, and we're really thinking about providers in 3 categories: ready to mentor and teach, so those truly exemplar programs that are not just ready to implement, but are really ready to coach and support their peers; ready to implement, so folks that meet all the quality standards and are ready to go; and then ready to learn. And that ready to learn pipeline is where we'll be pulling folks in and providing them with all of the coaching, mentorship, and support that Lydia is talking about to really bring everybody in this community who wants to be a preschool for all provider up to the level of quality to be able to participate, so that families have a large number of programs to choose from as the program grows to maturity.
I think Eder had a couple questions.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of logistical questions as well. One of them being, you just mentioned the sort of flexibility that the program will have to offer different kind of childcare structures. And I'm wondering if, workplace childcare is one of the things that would fall under what the program would fund. And I'm sorry, I just have like the movie 9 to 5 in mind while I'm asking this question.
Any program that meets our quality standards and is licensed and wants to participate is eligible to become a Preschool for All provider.
Okay, right on. And so I'm also looking at, and I think this might have come up in a county board meeting previously, but I just wanted to double check and make sure on our end here in that, once the, money is collected and the tax money is collected and the county kind of has its purview over it. I'm thinking right now about the Biden campaign's proposal to pump about $775 billion in childcare programs over 10 years. So, I know that there are a lot of things that would need to happen in order for that to come to fruition, but let's say it did. At that point, if the federal government is providing some support for programs like this, what happens to the pool of money that the county has collected for universal preschool at that point? Does the county have purview over how to use that extra sum? Is there a mechanism to revisit and say, we won't collect this much anymore? How does that work and what would that look like?
Yeah, so it was so exciting to have so many of the Democratic presidential candidates this year talking about universal childcare and universal preschool. That was very exciting. It kind of goes along, I think, with the local momentum that we're seeing of like having a huge community push to move to universal preschool this year. And I, for one, would be ecstatic if Biden won on November 3rd and we had, his policy areas in front of us. That being said, I think the work that's been happening with Preschool for All has been going on with the community for the last, several years and really looking at what we need for universal preschool here. And I think we're building something that can be a great model, a great blueprint of how to design a universal system that's inclusive, that reflects the needs of brown and Black children and all children who have the least access to preschool right now, right? So that we're really set up to play that role. But if that investment is made and if they're able to successfully get that program up and running, then the Board of Commissioners does have, the ability to really adjust, what the tax rate is and how much money is collected, and, as part of the board's authority. So that's something that's that we definitely have the ability to do.
Great.
Perfect, thanks.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, great. We are at the end of our hour, so thank you very much for your time. This was really helpful and informative, and I appreciate the discussion. If I have any follow-up, I will, I guess, contact Alicia, but I think we are pretty much all set. Thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.